The haunting of the old St. Mary's Hospital. Nestled in a quiet corner of a small town lies the old St. Mary's Hospital, a once bustling medical facility, now abandoned and shrouded in a veil of mystery and fear. The hospital, which opened its doors in the early 1900s, was a cornerstone of the community, offering medical care to countless residents over the decades. However, beneath its storied history of healing lay a series of dark and unsettling events that would come to haunt its halls long after its doors were closed. A legacy of suffering. The old St. Mary's Hospital was known for its compassionate care and groundbreaking medical practices, but it also had a less admirable side. During its later years, it became notorious for overcrowding and understaffing. The hospital struggled to keep up with the influx of patients, and stories of neglect and mistreatment began to surface. The conditions were harsh, and patients often faced long waits for care, or, worse, inadequate treatment. One particularly grim period in the hospital's history was during the 1950s, when a series of outbreaks of a particularly virulent strain of influenza overwhelmed the hospital. The wards were filled to capacity with patients suffering from severe symptoms, and the medical staff, stretched thin, struggled to provide the necessary care. Many of the patients did not survive, and the hospital was soon overwhelmed by a wave of grief and frustration. The sense of despair that permeated the hospital during this time would leave a lasting impression on its history. The beginning of the hauntings. As the years went by, tales of hauntings began to emerge from the old hospital. Staff members who worked late shifts started reporting strange occurrences. It began with minor incidents, flickering lights, unexplained drafts, and the occasional eerie feeling of being watched. But these disturbances soon escalated. One of the earliest reports came from a night nurse named Carol. Carol was known for her dedication and calm demeanor, even under the most stressful conditions. However, she found her composure tested one fateful night. While making her rounds in the ward, she heard the distinct sound of a child crying. Confused, as the pediatric ward had been closed for some time, she followed the sound through the empty, dimly lit halls. The crying seemed to lead her to room 312, a room that had been closed off for renovations. When she opened the door, the room was empty, but the crying continued, now clearly coming from within the walls. Carol, her heart racing, quickly exited the room and reported the incident to her supervisor. Her report was met with skepticism, and no investigation was conducted. But the experience left Carol visibly shaken, and she requested to be reassigned to a different shift. The ghostly patients. The stories of ghostly encounters continued to spread among the hospital staff. It wasn't long before patients began reporting strange experiences as well. One particularly unsettling account came from a man named Robert, who was admitted to the hospital for a routine procedure. Robert was recovering in a semi-private room when he noticed something odd. He would often hear the sound of footsteps pacing outside his door late at night. The footsteps were heavy, and they seemed to stop right outside his room before abruptly vanishing. The sounds were so distinct that Robert was convinced someone was walking past his door, but whenever he looked out, there was no one in sight. One night, the footsteps were accompanied by the sound of soft, agonized whispers. Robert, too frightened to sleep, lay in his bed trying to make sense of the noises. He finally fell into an uneasy slumber, only to be awakened by the sensation of a cold hand gripping his arm. When he turned on the light, the room was empty, and the sensation of the grip was gone. Robert, deeply disturbed by the experience, discharged himself from the hospital early, unwilling to stay another night. The final years. As the years went on, the old St. Mary's Hospital faced increasing financial difficulties. The state of disrepair and the mounting costs of maintenance led to its eventual closure in the 1990s. The hospital stood vacant, its once busy corridors now silent and eerie. In the years following its closure, the hospital became a site of urban exploration. Ghost hunters and paranormal investigators flocked to the abandoned building, drawn by the stories of hauntings and the building's dark history. Many reported experiencing unsettling phenomena, strange noises, ghostly apparitions, and a pervasive feeling of dread. One of the most famous investigations was conducted by a local paranormal team known as the Spectral Seekers. Equipped with cameras, EVP, electronic voice phenomena recorders, and other ghost hunting equipment, they spent a night in the hospital, capturing eerie footage and recording disturbing sounds. One of the most chilling moments occurred when an EVP recording picked up a voice clearly saying, "Help me," followed by the sound of a child crying, a haunting echo of the experiences reported by Carol and Robert years earlier. The present day. Today, the old St. Mary's Hospital remains a symbol of the macabre. The building is fenced off and trespassing is prohibited, but stories of its hauntings continue to circulate. The cries of lost children, the heavy footsteps in the halls, and the cold, ghostly hand that gripped Robert's arm are etched into the collective memory of those who encountered the hospital's dark presence. The haunting of the old St. Mary's Hospital serves as a stark reminder of the spirits that may linger in places where suffering and death have left their mark. The hospital, now a relic of the past, remains a testament to the enduring mystery of the paranormal, a place where the echoes of its tragic history continue to resonate long after its doors have closed. The haunting of the old General Hospital. In the heart of a quiet town stood the old General Hospital, a once bustling medical facility that served the community for over a century. Opened in the early 1900s, it was renowned for its medical care and innovation, but its history was also marked by periods of significant turmoil and tragedy, a history of misfortune. The old General Hospital had a dark chapter during the 1940s and 1950s. During this period, the hospital faced a severe shortage of staff and resources, leading to overcrowded wards and a high rate of patient mortality. The hospital struggled to manage a series of epidemics, including a particularly devastating outbreak of tuberculosis that overwhelmed its capacity. The suffering and death during this time left a significant emotional and spiritual impact on the hospital. Patients and families experienced extreme distress, and many individuals passed away under conditions of considerable hardship. The halls of the hospital, once filled with the bustle of medical activity, became silent witnesses to the sorrow and pain that marked these years. Unsettling experiences begin. As the hospital aged, staff and patients began reporting unsettling phenomena. The first reports came from the night shift nurses, who described strange occurrences in the empty, dimly lit wards. They spoke of unexplained noises, clattering footsteps, the sound of a gurney moving on its own, and doors slamming shut by themselves. One nurse, Anne, was particularly affected by these experiences. During a late shift in the oncology ward, she reported hearing the distinct sound of a woman weeping. The sound seemed to come from the empty rooms, and despite her thorough searches, she found no one. The crying continued intermittently, and Anne could never quite shake the feeling that someone was watching her. Her colleagues, initially skeptical, began to share similar stories, adding to the growing legend of the haunted hospital. The phantom patient. The most disturbing account came from a patient named James, who was admitted for a routine surgery. James was recovering in a semi-private room when he began to notice strange occurrences. At night, he would hear a whispering voice near his bed, though no one was there. The voice seemed to be calling his name, and sometimes it would turn into a hushed, frantic murmuring. One night, James was startled awake by a cold hand gripping his arm. When he turned on the light, he saw nothing but the empty room. He reported the incident to the staff, who dismissed it as a nightmare induced by medication. But James knew what he had felt, and the experience left him deeply unsettled. He requested an early discharge and left the hospital, but the encounter remained with him long after he had recovered. The dark room. Perhaps the most infamous location within the old General Hospital was Room 109, which had a particularly eerie reputation. This room, located in the oldest wing of the hospital, had been the site of many deaths over the years. The room's history included several suicides and unexplained deaths, which contributed to its dark reputation. Staff members working late shifts often reported feeling an oppressive presence in Room 109. Objects in the room would move on their own, and the air would become inexplicably cold. Some described hearing a heavy, labored breathing coming from the room, though it was always empty when checked. One night, a security guard named Tom decided to investigate the source of these disturbances. Armed with a flashlight and a sense of determination, he entered Room 109. As he walked through the room, he felt an icy chill and heard a low, mournful wail. The sound seemed to be coming from within the walls. Tom, unable to bear the growing sense of dread, fled the room and refused to return to that wing of the hospital. The final days. As the hospital approached its final years, it faced increasing financial difficulties. The once busy corridors grew silent, and the building fell into disrepair. The old General Hospital closed its doors in the early 2000s, leaving behind a ghostly legacy that continued to attract attention. Paranormal investigators and curious visitors often explored the abandoned hospital, drawn by the stories of hauntings and eerie experiences. Many reported capturing strange phenomena on camera: ghostly figures, unexplained orbs of light, and disembodied voices. The building's history of suffering seemed to have left an indelible mark, and the haunting of the old General Hospital became a popular topic of local legend. The present day. Today, the old General Hospital stands as a haunting relic of the past. The building is fenced off, and trespassing is prohibited, but the stories of its haunted history persist. The whispers in the night, the cold grips on the arm, and the mournful cries continue to be recounted by those who experienced them or heard about them from others. The old General Hospital serves as a chilling reminder of the way suffering can leave a lasting impression on a place. Its haunted halls, still echoing with the memories of those who once sought care, remain a testament to the enduring mystery of the supernatural, a place where the boundaries between the past and present seem to blur in the shadows of its abandoned corridors. The mystery of St. Francis Hospital. St. Francis Hospital, located in a quiet part of the Midwest, has long been known for its dedication to patient care and its innovative medical practices. Established in the early 1900s, it has a history that spans over a century. However, beneath its reputation for medical excellence lies a series of eerie and unexplained occurrences that have puzzled both staff and visitors. A haunted beginning. The hospital's story of hauntings dates back to the 1940s, a period marked by significant medical advancements, but also by the strain of wartime stress and economic hardship. During this era, the hospital saw an increase in both the number of patients and the complexity of their conditions. This strain resulted in a high mortality rate, particularly in the intensive care units and emergency wards. One notable event was the tragic outbreak of a severe respiratory illness that swept through the hospital in the late 1940s. The wards were filled with patients, many of whom did not survive. The suffering and death during this period left a lasting impact on the hospital, and many believe it was during this time that the hospital's haunting began. The ghost of Nurse Helen. One of the most well-known ghost stories from St. Francis Hospital is that of Nurse Helen, a dedicated and compassionate nurse who worked at the hospital during the 1940s. Helen was known for her kindness and commitment to her patients, but her life took a tragic turn when she contracted the same respiratory illness that plagued her patients. Helen's death was sudden and unexpected. She passed away in the hospital where she had worked, and her passing was deeply mourned by both staff and patients. It was not long after her death that reports of her ghostly presence began to surface. Nurse Helen's ghost is often described as a benevolent figure. Staff members and patients alike have reported seeing a woman in old-fashioned nursing attire moving through the hospital's corridors. She is said to be carrying a lantern, which she uses to illuminate her way. Witnesses have described her as a calming presence, often appearing at the bedside of patients who are in distress. One memorable encounter involved a patient named Sarah, who was recovering from surgery. Sarah awoke in the middle of the night to find a figure standing by her bed, holding a lantern. The figure was dressed in a vintage nurse's uniform, and Sarah felt a sense of peace and comfort. When she asked the nurse if she needed anything, the figure simply smiled and then disappeared. The cursed operating room. Another area of the hospital with a dark reputation is the old operating room, which has been in use since the early 1920s. Over the years, this operating room has been the site of numerous surgeries, some successful and others tragic. It has gained a reputation for being particularly haunted. Staff working in the old operating room have reported a variety of strange occurrences. The most common phenomenon is the unexplained sound of surgical instruments clattering and moving on their own. Sometimes these noises occur even when the room is empty and no one is nearby. One of the most chilling accounts involves a surgeon named Dr. Roberts, who worked at the hospital in the 1950s. Dr. Roberts was known for his skill in the operating room, but he became increasingly distressed as he encountered a series of inexplicable incidents. Instruments would frequently go missing, only to reappear in different places. Dr. Roberts began to believe that the room was cursed, On one occasion, Dr. Roberts was in the middle of a critical surgery when the lights in the operating room flickered and then went out completely. The room was plunged into darkness, and the temperature dropped suddenly. Dr. Roberts, struggling to continue the surgery by the light of a single flashlight, reported feeling a presence in the room with him. He described a cold, oppressive atmosphere and a feeling of being watched. Despite his best efforts, the patient did not survive, and Dr. Roberts became convinced that the room was haunted. The Phantom Child. Perhaps the most unsettling story from St. Francis Hospital involves the phantom of a child who is said to roam the pediatric ward. The story goes that during the 1960s, a young girl named Emily was admitted to the hospital with a serious illness. Despite the best efforts of the medical staff, Emily's condition worsened, and she passed away. Emily's death was a devastating blow to her family and the hospital staff who had cared for her. It was soon after her passing that reports of her ghost began to emerge. Visitors to the pediatric ward have reported seeing the ghostly figure of a young girl in a hospital gown, often playing with toys or sitting by the window. One particularly haunting encounter was reported by a hospital volunteer named Linda. Linda was working in the pediatric ward late at night when she heard the sound of children's laughter. When she went to investigate, she saw a small girl sitting in one of the empty beds, playing with a stuffed animal. The girl looked up at Linda with a sad expression before disappearing. Linda's experience was corroborated by other staff members who had reported similar encounters. The phantom child's presence is often accompanied by a sudden drop in temperature and the faint sound of a lullaby playing from an unseen source. The investigation. The haunting of St. Francis Hospital has attracted the attention of numerous paranormal investigators. These investigations have often yielded intriguing results, including recordings of unexplained voices and footage of ghostly apparitions. One notable investigation involved a team of ghost hunters who set up equipment in the old operating room and the pediatric ward. The team captured several anomalies on film, including a shadowy figure moving through the old operating room and a ghostly image of a child in the pediatric ward. The EVP recordings from the investigation included chilling messages such as, "Help me, and I'm still here," which were believed to be from the spirits of those who had passed away in the hospital. The present day. Today, St. Francis Hospital continues to operate as a modern medical facility. The old sections of the hospital have been renovated, but the stories of hauntings persist. The ghost of Nurse Helen, the cursed operating room, and the phantom child remain a part of the hospital's lore. The hospital's staff and patients occasionally recount their experiences, and the building's haunted reputation continues to attract the curious and the brave. St. Francis Hospital stands as a testament to the enduring impact of its past, where the echoes of its history seem to linger in its halls.